Hey, horror fans, happy October once again. Bored now, back with Rachel McDonald. And we're here because Halloween Kills is out. It came out just yesterday online and in cinemas for some people. So it's a brand new release. So we're excited to get to it pretty much straight away after its release. If you've been following our reviews in the recent weeks, you'll know we've worked our way through the whole franchise. So we're bang up to date. So, yes, this is the second of three movies from David Gordon Green in the Halloween franchise, sort of like a little trilogy he's doing. Jamie Lee Curtis is back again for this one. She signed on for all three of these films. You also have returning characters, the Judy Greer character, Karen, who plays like Laurie's daughter, also her daughter, Alison, returns for this one as Dom from the previous movie on the same night. So Laurie and Alison and the family basically are sort of carted off to hospital to kind of, convalesce their wounds. And the sort of the main plot or the fresh plot is then they return to the Tommy Doyle character, who was of course first seen in the original Halloween. He was one of the kids that Laurie was babysitting for or babysat. And now we get a grown-up version, not played by Paul Rudd, this time played by sadly not. No, sorry, Paul, you're out. But played by
Michael Hall.
Yeah,
yes,
the
from the Breakfast Club
guy. Very.
Yes.
When Michael Myers is on the loose again, because of course he survived the fire in the basement, because of course he did.
Because of course he did.
goes on another killing spree. Tommy Doyle, still impacted all these years later. He is at the head of like a sort of a rebellion against Michael Myers, where this group of characters, they decide then it's time to stand up to him as a town. And that's kind of the thread that they're going for, which is sort of picking up like one of the sub sort of themes that you had in like sort of Halloween 2, for example, and hinted at in other sequels. I think there's a little bit of that in Halloween 4 as well, but it's sort of an idea they've played with, but only in a small way. Obviously, this time it becomes sort of a main focus. So you kind of have that plot going on. You have the stuff with Laurie back at the hospital with her sort of selling her wounds and kind of just getting herself back into like mental shape and finding out obviously that Michael is in fact still alive and not dead like she thought. And then you obviously get the sort of kills around the town with Michael. And you also get this bigger role for like Chief Hawkins, who of course is a character from the first movie. And we get some flashback with him and sort of various callbacks to the first movie. So that's Halloween Kills, the general setup. I'll start with you, Rachel. What did you think of Halloween?
Okay. All right. So I'm not even sure where to start. First of all, we should probably say that we will be discussing big spoilers because we can't discuss this movie without discussing the spoilers. So when Halloween 2018 came out, I was so excited for that one. I was pumped. I'd watched all the trailers. I went into the cinema feeling so excited. This one I was a little bit more apprehensive about. And I think it was because we were going to be making the set bigger. So obviously a lot of the interviews and a lot of the build-up, they were very much building into this is going to be the town versus Michael Myers, which, as Keith pointed out, is something that has been hinted at before. We've discussed it in our previous reviews. We've seen scenes where they've, attacked the Meyer house. There's even a scene in the fourth or the fifth one where they chase him down. But for me, the Halloween films work best when they're more intimate, when they're smaller, when they are a more quiet setting. So I was wary about the film taking the concept of Michael Myers into a bigger arena. And I have to admit, it didn't quite work for me. Not 100%. And I think it was just because we have never had Michael Myers in a setting this big. Like I said, Halloween films, they're very intimate. They're about the coziness and creepiness of Halloween. They're about a stalker coming in and disrupting a small suburban town. Even Halloween 2018, which was bigger than the original 1978 one, because you had the podcasters, you had the sheriffs, you had more characters, you had more settings, but it still felt more intimate. This felt big. This movie felt very, very big to me. There were lots of mob scenes, there were lots of crowd scenes, and we'll get into this as we continue to discuss it. But for me, I found what worked in this movie best were the scenes with Michael, because Michael is still a freaking beast and an unstoppable force of nature in this film. If anything, he is more brutal. I've seen quite a few people already comment that this movie should basically be called Michael Myers Revenge, like the Revenge of Michael Myers actually works better as a title for this movie, because he really is going on a rampage. But I found that a lot of the scenes with him worked a lot better for me. I loved the scene where he comes out of the burning house and basically takes out like a dozen firefighters in 5 minutes, because again, you just see that unstoppable brutality of the character in that scene. I really liked the scene where he was terrorizing the returning characters in the park. Now, we should talk about the fact that it's not just, so Tommy Doyle comes back as a character, but we also have Nurse Marion come back, and we have the little girl whose Annie was babysitting, whose name has completely gone out of my head, but she's played by the same actress who played her in 1978. So I thought that was actually very cool that they brought those characters back. And there's a great scene where Michael is stalking them in a park, and I thought that scene was really effective. And so I really liked all the Michael scenes, but the crowd scenes, I don't know, they didn't quite work for me. They were just too much. I do, however, want to give a special mention, though, to the flashback scenes, because I thought that the flashback scenes were done so well. I don't know how they managed to do this, but they literally look like a movie that's been shot in the 70s, and that is very, very hard to do. They managed to adjust the lighting, the camera work, even the hairstyles. It doesn't look like it's trying to be the 70s. It looks like it's actually the 70s. I actually felt like I was watching like deleted footage from the 70s, like maybe they just pulled out some deleted footage from the original movie. And I thought that was actually really effective. I liked the background showing Hawkins, and I really liked, because I was very worried about the scene where they finally took down Michael Myers, because I was like, at first it looked like it was just going to be two of the cops, and I was like, you're going to have two beat cops take down Michael Myers? I mean, I know that Hawkins is a good guy and all, but this is Michael Myers. So the shot where you see him come out the house and all of the policemen are just surrounding him, I was like, now that's what you want. And of course, we have that cameo from Loomis, which was completely unexpected. And I thought that was fantastic. We get a beautiful little CGI cameo in of Dr. Loomis. It's amazing what you can do with technology these days. And that for me was just like, oh my God, I can't believe they managed to bring him back after all these years. And of course, that shot with Michael standing with all the policemen in front of him, Loomis is just standing behind him, like looming over him, pun intended, to kind of, show that they're taking him down. So I thought the flashback scenes worked really well. I thought the Michael scenes worked really well. I didn't think that the town going after Michael worked very well, at least not for me. We'll get more into that. But before I go any further, what about you? What are your initial thoughts?
I agree with some of that. I agree. Then sort of saying is that Halloween as a franchise, as a concept, works best when it's kept simple.
For
you
yes,
have this cat and mouse thing, Michael Myers, and I agree with that. And that's part of the problem with the movie, is that it doesn't keep it simple. It sort of overcomplicates things. There's a lot of different things going on, and we'll get to the mob stuff, because I agree the mob stuff doesn't work, and not only does it not work, it's absolutely shambolic. I mean it doesn't. I'm not really. I mean, I know what, because they were hardly subtle about what they were going for. We can talk more about that. This sucked. I thought this was rubbish. I thought it was complete and utter rubbish. So we'll start with, because I have a few different problems. One is the one I just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll circle back to that, but I think the political point they were trying to make with that stuff didn't really land and didn't really add up. It was very sort of in your face. But, well, two other problems. One is a lot of the Michael Myers stuff I didn't like because I just felt it was too much like an action movie, too much like violence for the sake of violence, because we both commented on largely they avoided that in the last film. You know, less was kind of more in that movie. There were one or two scenes, but I think in this they don't hold back at all. And some of the stuff you enjoyed, like the scene with the fight, you know, that stuff I just hated because I just thought it was OTT. I thought we sort of saw far too much of Michael from very early in the movie for him to be that effective. Again, I don't think it was scary. I mean, I could sort of see how in the first like David Gordon Green film, to a certain extent, they got back to basics, and I could see how maybe scenes in that was scary and suspenseful. I obviously challenged you on that one, but I mean, in this, no way. I was never scared. Not really. I thought it was, you know, violent for the sake of violence, and just too much going on all the time. Too much OTT. Another problem I had, which again sort of creeped into the last film, but we both agreed then for the most part they dialed it down. And someone else I've seen online has commented on this, is for a lot of it, this felt more like a comedy horror than a straight up horror, because there's again coming from David Gordon Green, his background, again coming from, because Danny McBride is one of the writers on this movie. And I think people are well aware of his brand of humour. And his brand of humour, whether you like it or not, is not something you want to see in a Halloween
film.
movie.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, I mean, there's a couple of bad taste jokes that just take you out of scenes. I'll just name quick examples. We can always come back to these. But like the example with the gay couple who are now living in Michael Myers. We can talk because there's some really silly stuff with them.
Yeah.
But I mean, just there's a line from one of them at one point when they're trying to scare the kids about, you know, the girl, whichever character it was, had her like titty slashed up there or something. And
yeah, he said that he stabbed her in the tit, and I was like, yeah, that's weird. Why would you say it like that?
Yeah, because it's almost making light of like a tragedy, and it's just this weird sort of line. I mean, they're only really trying to scare the kids, like to get back at them. And there's just stuff where they just throw comedy in, which takes you out of what is supposed to be like a scary sort of scene. So there's another scene with this couple who obviously Michael goes after, and there's a line about, you know, Monster Mash or something. He looks like the Monster Mash.
I don't remember that.
It was like the African American couple when the guy, like, obviously Michael's in the bathroom and he just makes this crack about it. He looks like the Monster Mash or something.
Yeah, I did not like that scene at all. They could have, I forgot about, the older couple that live near Laurie, and they talk about Laurie. That being said, the older lady, I did love when the guy threatened to like go over and talk to Laurie, and she's like, oh, she will kill you if you go over there. Like, she's obviously got a reputation. But I agree, that whole scene could have just been taken out. I didn't enjoy that scene at all.
Yeah.
It was a useless kill. It was a stupid kill. It added nothing to the story whatsoever. It was more like they just wanted to be like, oh, we need to rack up a body count. Who can we have Michael kill? And so they just send him to kill some random old couple.
And we both enjoyed the Julian stuff in that film, and we both agreed then his lines actually, because it's coming from a kid, then we were sort of fine with it, and it was the sort of light relief that you wanted. But with this, I mean, regardless of whether you enjoyed the comedy or not, I think they just overdid it with trying to come up with all these bad taste sort of lines and just throwing them into scenes where obviously Michael is going after people. Let's talk about the opening scene, because I don't like it as much as you. I can appreciate what you're saying, and I'll give them technical credit for that, because I never thought about that. That's true. It does look like a 70s looking sort of scene. The CGI Loomis pissed me off, to be honest. I just leave Loomis out of it at this point. Just move on. I mean, we don't need this stuff with CGI Loomis. He's sort of served his purpose now in the Halloween franchise. I mean, obviously, when we talked about H2O, we sort of appreciated the way they did that, where they just used like the sound of like his voice, like the monologue from the past. I think that's the way you do it. I think to actually throw him in a scene at this point, and don't forget, we're talking about a fresh scene here, like a sort of a constructed scene. It's not like they're just rerunning like footage we've already seen. I sort of found it very distracting. It took me out of the film. Through my mind when I was watching it is, this is a bit like they're doing Halloween the TV series, where you suddenly have to go back again to the past, and you have to have this backstory for Hawkins, who's a character, okay, we've seen a little bit of him, but he's obviously not one of the main characters. And you just have to have all this filler, all this, I mean, it's not filler because obviously they go somewhere with it, but, you know, it's just this backstory to this character who, in the grand scheme of things, isn't that important in the Halloween franchise. And that's what it reminded me of. It reminded me of, if this was like a TV series, then they would obviously have all this origin stuff. Halloween, just do a TV series. Not that I would be in favour of that, because I think that would be overkill maybe anyway. But I'm just saying, blanks from the first film that we don't need filled in, because the first film is intact. It's an intact story. It works perfectly. And I think this is part my problem with the way David Gordon Green has approached these movies. I think he's gone overkill with the nostalgia, and I think he relies too much on that original movie. Nice little nods to the original movie, but that's as far as it should go. I just want a new Halloween story. I want it. That's what I want from a modern Halloween movie. I don't want all these flashbacks. I don't want all these backstories and motivations, because we sort of get another scene with Michael. We get, obviously, Loomis inserted to all this. So while I can appreciate it on the technical level, although the Loomis stuff, for whatever reason, took me out of it, because I just thought, well, that's not Loomis. Probably because it's a CGI Loomis. So I did hate that moment with Loomis.
On when you were saying that you know, if you're going to continue the franchise, you want a new franchise, you don't want it relying on nostalgia. I'm wondering if maybe we have this new explanation and this backstory that they're filling in, because this movie is, because it's a direct continuation of the first movie. Like, this movie disregards every other sequel, and it is supposed to tie directly into the first movie. So they might be leaning into that maybe a little bit harder than is necessary. But I think that these scenes they're bringing in, because obviously if you are directly following the first movie, then we have to change some of the canon that we already know. So maybe they have this scene because we have to see how Michael was originally brought down, because he wasn't in the original movie, and we have to see, you know, who brought him down. And we also know that from Halloween 2018, Hawkins already spoke about how he was there the night that Michael was apprehended. So, which is obviously a little bit of a, well, not a retcon, but it's a different canon. And so the feeling that I'm getting is that this movie became this big so that it could shrink down and become small again for the final act. And I feel like the final act is going to be down to Laurie and Michael and possibly Hawkins as well. And so we needed to get that background for that final showdown, which, whether or not it works, is, I think, comes down to the individual. I didn't mind the background stuff. I didn't mind the Hawkins character. I didn't like that weird little conversation they gave him and Laurie in the hospital, where they hinted that there was a little bit of a romantic past between them. I thought that was stupid and led nowhere. And we 100% did not need that scene, especially because there was no hint of that in the first movie. Like, maybe if we'd had a whiff of it in the first movie, that would have been something to build on, but it like completely came out of nowhere. I liked that Hawkins survived because I was very upset when he died in the first film, but I do understand where you're coming from with trying to like it feels like they're padding things and they're maybe leaning on nostalgia too much. But I don't know, for me it didn't bother me that much. For some reason, I don't know if it's just because there's been so many movies without him, but when Loomis turned up on the screen, I just got this massive big smile on my face, like, oh my God, it's Loomis, he's back, who knew? But I think that maybe what they're trying to do is just create this whole new canon so that you could maybe watch the first movie and then watch these three movies right afterwards and kind of view them as a complete experience. The other thing I'm trying to keep in mind is that this is the second part of a trilogy. So we maybe need to not judge it completely until we see the final act and see how everything kind of falls into place, which I don't know if is a good thing or a bad thing. This is the problem with when you plan a movie as a trilogy, is that the middle section sometimes becomes the filler section. And I feel like this movie was definitely like that. Like, it was just bridging the gap between the first movie to get us from the first movie to the last movie. And it did feel very fillery, this movie. Like, there wasn't a lot that actually moved things forward. Like, if you asked me what the plot was for this movie, I would have trouble telling you exactly what the plot is. The first movie, 2018, can stand alone as its own film. This one can't. Like, this one, you have to have watched the first film and you will have to watch the third film. And I don't necessarily know. I feel like if you're going to do a trilogy, each film still needs to be able to stand as its own film without the other two. And this one feels like it won't do that. Like, it has to be part of that 3-part series. And that's maybe not the best approach to take.
Because it's not the beginning and it's not the end. It does feel like this weird thing in the middle. And I think there's definitely some of that stuff, that feel to this movie. I think just on point with Jamie Lee Curtis, I too hated that scene. And I think in a lot of ways you didn't need Laurie in this movie. I mean, obviously I know, I understand why she's here, but I think you could have almost gave her the movie off and just brought her back for the third one. You could have just had it where you saw a little bit of her and she's sort of convalescing in hospital, and maybe have the odd bit of dialogue with Allison and what have you. But apart from that, I don't think they really gave us her enough to do to really justify her being in the movie. And it was obviously jumping about a lot, so...
It's a hard option because, you need to be a little bit realistic. Like, she's an older woman now. She's been stabbed in the stomach. She can't really be, running around taking on Michael Myers after that. So they did have to kind of put her on the sidelines. But then it does feel like she's wasted. It's like you said, why not just give her the movie off and then just have her come back? So, yeah, Laurie obviously it feels like she's wasted, but it makes sense narratively for what she's doing. Like, it is realistic that she would have to sit this one out because she was quite badly injured. And while she has picked up a little bit of Michael's supernatural ability, she hasn't quite got to his level yet. So I wanted to say I definitely agree with you about a lot of the kills being overkill. I found the brutality in this movie very hard to take sometimes. Some scenes I liked. Like I said, I liked the firefighter scene, but I didn't like the old couple scene. I didn't like Allison's boyfriend. Let's talk about Allison's boyfriends for 2 seconds, okay? Now, Allison's boyfriend in the first movie is a complete dick. And if he died in that movie, I would have been happy. In this movie, he gets a little bit of a redemption. He finds the sheriff. He helps the sheriff out. He decides that he wants to go after Michael. You find out, now this was a retcon I didn't like, or a little bit of added that I didn't like because it didn't come up in the first film. But you find out that his father, the boyfriend's father, encountered Michael back in the 70s. And this was an added scene. That felt weird because I feel like if that was the case, why wouldn't that have come up in the first movie? Why wouldn't Allison and her boyfriend both talked about how they have family members who have been affected by Michael Myers? Like, for me, it didn't make any sense that all of a sudden it was revealed that his dad encountered Michael Myers. It was like, well, this is obviously something that is important. Surely we would have had the girl, Allison, and the boyfriend talk about this in the first movie if that was actually the case.
So it possibly could have been an afterthought, like they didn't have that planned all along.
Exactly.
Or maybe it's just slightly sloppy writing and they sort of knew they were going to do that, but for some reason
didn't set it up. Yeah, it was weird.
Possibly.
But then the boyfriend, after getting this kind of redemption arc where he goes out and he helps to hunt Michael and he helps to protect Allison, he gets one of the most brutal deaths I have seen in this franchise, where he gets stabbed. Michael smacks him into a staircase railing. He gets his face beaten in like over and over and over. And it takes him, like, he doesn't die. He's still alive throughout this whole process. And then
it's
Michael,
a really slow kill.
Snaps his whole neck just right around. And the sheer brutality of that scene was really starting to make me uncomfortable. And there are quite a few other scenes that are like that, where the deaths are just, they're too over the top. And it might fit with this theme of Michael going on revenge, you know. I mean, the Strode women did stab him and shoot him and trying to burn him alive. I'd probably be pissed after that too. So it might be showing the escalation. But for me, it didn't work because, as we've spoken about before, Michael is most effective when he's killing cleanly and efficiently and silently, not this kind of big rage machine who's suddenly just beating people to pulp. I didn't find the movie scary per se. It didn't have that tension that we talk about that Halloween films should have. But there were 3 jump scares that actually got to me, and I don't know if it was just because I've been watching a lot of horror lately, so I'm just a bit more open. But there were 3 times that Michael appeared out of nowhere that actually scared the crap out of me. One was during the flashbacks. Another one was when the gay couple were in the house and he pops out behind one of them. And I think the third one was when he comes after the boyfriend. He just appears out of nowhere, and both Stephen and I were watching together and we both jumped. So, but aside from that, I'm with you. I don't think this one was particularly scary.
Portrays what Michael is as a character, because I mean, I was listening to a review the other day of like the Rob Zombie Halloween, and one of the comments like the reviewer made is that it seems Rob Zombie is really obsessed with Leatherface, because the way he makes Michael act is more like Leatherface. But this is the thing. I think, to me, the stuff you're describing where he's going on a vendetta and he's like killing people brutally and really like extending their deaths, really like messing with them, it doesn't fit with his character. For me, his character is a lot more he's lurking in the shadows, he pops out, and it's a quick sort of kill. I mean, okay, if he gets into a bit of a struggle and it's a fight, then maybe he might do it more brutally because it's like desperation. But I mean, outside of that, I think it goes against his character, really. And okay, you might have the odd thing where he pops up and it does make you jump, but no, in general, I didn't think it was scary, and I just thought it was OTT. I thought less would have been more. There was too much going on.
Say there was too much going on. I definitely feel that, because I felt that a lot, because we constantly jump from scene to scene to scene to scene. You know, we're with Laurie, we're with the daughter, we're with Anthony Michael Hall, we're with this, we're with that. They jump around a lot. And this might be a good place to segue into the mob scenes and what they were trying to do with that. Because, so basically there's this whole premise of the town is getting angry, the town is getting riled up. Little Tommy Doyle, who's now 50, is like stirring everyone up and is all like, evil dies tonight, evil dies tonight. And I feel like they wanted to make some sort of commentary on mob mentality and mass hysteria, which are obviously very scary, terrifying things that do happen in real life. And I did find the scenes where they were all swarming through the hospital and people were getting trampled, and Laurie ends up trampled on the floor with her stitches coming out, screaming for help. I did find that not scary, but distressing, because mass hysteria is, for me, a very terrifying thing. It's something that I find very, but I didn't think that it fit in this film. You know, it's like, it was fine. I was distressed, and I thought the scenes were effective, but I also thought they were very jarring, because for me, it didn't feel like these films don't need to be making this sort of commentary, you know, like that's not what the Halloween films are about. They're not here to make social commentary. They're not here to kind of delve any deeper. They're just supposed to be a simple story about the boogeyman. So the mass hysteria scenes really didn't work for me. What about you?
To consider whether they're credible and whether, because there is a history of horror making political points, but I think the difference is then I think they look, the good examples make political points without breaking the sort of horror narrative at its core. So obviously a classic example is Night of the Living Dead. That, like, the ending of that film and the commentary on race, they managed to mold that together with like the horror narrative. But this just doesn't work at all. I mean, there's no credibility to it. There's no, because just to talk a bit about where it leads and escalates is at one point they're convinced that this one particular character is Michael Myers, and it's overly telegraphed, but it's just this sort of random guy who's a patient, and he's just like making noises, screaming, and they go after him, and obviously that you know, not subtle, that what leads to his like downfall when he jumps out the window. And again, OTT with the gore effect on the landing. I mean, come on.
And it really doesn't fit with that scene, like, because that scene is so like supposed to be so sad and show like how he's been pushed to do this. And then then they have that weird shot of his like his whole arm is like twisted behind his head and his leg. It's like you don't follow that kind of level of gore from that kind of hysteria sad scene. That I agree. But you keep going.
But I think a lot of the stuff in the hospital was very melodramatic, very OTT. I felt that obviously with the Laurie and the Hawkins thing. But the way they shoot these scenes with the mob felt very much like that. But the other thing is, then it's not credible at all. Then they would mistake this guy for Michael Myers, because anyone who has any basic knowledge, which obviously Tommy would, having grown up with this stuff, would know then it's not going to be this short, balding, kind of, you know, quite fat sort of guy who's just, and not only does he not fit the physical description, but you can tell then this guy isn't a threat to anyone. You can tell he's not going to be like a maniac killer. And also, it doesn't really fit with Michael Myers. Then he would be like wearing a gown. I mean, he would just be dressed as he normally is. I mean, he's not the sort who's going to be in a disguise or something, and probably not going to be making his presence openly, you know, aware to people. So I thought it was a mess. Most of the stuff at the hospital I didn't like. An interview with Jamie Lee Curtis, and she obviously brought up the stuff at the start of this year with the riots in America, the Trump stuff, what happened there, the siege on, you know, Capitol Hill, basically. Now obviously this film would have been made before that anyway, because originally it was supposed to come out last year. But I think she was just commenting on it, saying, well, it's sort of funny how it sort of parallels kind of real life. And you know, in a way she has a point, but I don't think the comparisons quite match up. I don't think it's a credible sort of comparison would react in such an extreme manner. All of them because you obviously have the one character of Karen who's like trying to protect this guy and trying to say, no, calm down. And it just really stretched credibility. Then they would all, because it escalates pretty fast as well. And like you, I quite like the idea of them doing this storyline with the mob mentality, standing up to Michael, and it's a new direction, but I don't think the execution was very good at all. And just stuff like with Tommy, I think when he's sort of giving people advice on how to like kill Michael or how to fight him, and there's just this stuff where you have to say, well, what makes him such an expert? I mean, okay, he's grown up, but
yeah,
he
hasn't seen
Michael. Yeah, exactly. He hasn't seen Michael Myers for years. It's not really adding up to I wasn't really sold on their motivation, because at one point, Karen is like making this case for, we have a system here, and I think that's part of the debate they were going for. But we have a system here. We have police, and you just sort of think, well, Karen's sort of right. I mean, you're civilians.
Yeah.
Let the police, and I understand the whole thing of, well, there's enough of us, so we can probably take him down. But when your loved ones have been killed or they've been injured, any sensible person would be like, well, we're either going to just let the police do it, or as another measure, we're going to leave the town until he's no longer in the town. But it just wasn't very well handled. Like you, I like the concept, but the execution was really bad. Let's meet Tommy, because it's in this like stand-up type thing where it's at
like a bar, and there's some sort of talent contest going on. It's very open as to what the talent can be. We see singers and a ventriloquist, but yeah.
Yeah, that was another very weird scene, because it took on this weird tone where it's like the anniversary of what happened in the past, and I can kind of understand that, where he's trying to pay tribute to the victims, to the survivors. But then he does this weird sort of cut where he highlights who Annie was babysitting that night.
I don't know if they're married or if they're just hanging out, but they're both
Well,
there.
I got the impression they were together. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe they were just hanging out. But anyway, he just picks her out, like highlights her, and sort of says stuff like, Annie was killed, her babysitter was killed. And I just thought, this is a really weird and inappropriate thing for you to be doing. And just, I mean, how uncomfortable must she have been? That whole scene, I just thought was really weird, and I just think this film does a lot of silly things.
I think it was better in theory than in execution. I was talking to Stephen last night, and I was saying that I like this idea of bringing other victims of Michael's back, like we focus so much on Laurie, which I get because she's awesome and she is the main character, but like we have to remember that he had other victims. So in theory, I really like the idea that they were going to bring back Tommy, and they were going to bring back, the little girl that was babysitting, and I really liked that she was played by the same actress, and they brought back Nurse Marion, and I thought this could be very cool. But once again, kind of like the mob scenes, I don't feel like it was executed very well. I agree that the scene you're talking about is weird. Like at first I was kind of getting into it. I was like, oh, okay, we're kind of showing how Michael Myers has become a bit of a legend. Everyone knows about him in Haddonfield. He's become the boogeyman. But then, like you said, like he starts being like, oh, so-and-so here, she survived this. It's like, dude, did you ask her permission before you decided to get up and tell everyone her life story? Like it was weird. It was like good idea, but bad execution. And I think that's a real pity with this film, is that if they somehow managed to do these scenes a little bit better, maybe a little bit subtler, have a bit more of a build up to the mob going crazy. I think that's what they needed as well. They needed more build up so that when that hysteria happened, it was a believable payoff. But it's like you said, it's like everyone just kind of got up in arms and decided to go after this random mental patient with absolutely no proof, which can happen. That is kind of the whole thing of mob mentality and mass hysteria, is that you latch onto this one thing. But you're right, it didn't feel authentic, it didn't feel organic. It felt like, why are you suddenly just running after this random dude? There was not enough of a build-up. There needed to be more of a build-up. We needed to see more of exactly why the town is so against Michael. You needed to see more. I think we needed to see more reactions to the carnage, more reactions to him being in the town. It actually I was thinking when it comes to mass hysteria, because we recently reviewed Fear Street, which in the third movie is all about mass hysteria. And I just couldn't help comparing this movie to that movie, because in that movie, it's built up in such an organic way. We have this town that's been plagued by all of this blight that's come to town. They know that an evil has descended, and then they turn on these two innocent girls who go against their puritanical views, and you see it build up and build up and build up until they finally hang them. And this just didn't have that build up. It's like it went from 0 to 100. You know, it's like 1 second we're at the bar, the next second we're in the hospital, and everyone is chanting for Michael's head and screaming, "Evil dies tonight!" And it's like, what just happened? Let's just all calm down for 2 seconds. And it just didn't play out well. So I definitely agree with you. I think there were things in this film that I definitely liked more than you did. I think I have a higher opinion of this film than you do. Like I said, I liked the flashback scenes. I liked Loomis appearing. I thought that Michael was still very effective. I thought Karen was a complete badass in this film. I thought her character got to it's almost like she became the Laurie stand-in while Laurie was out of commission. The torch was kind of passed to Karen to kind of become, you know, because she was trying to help the guy, she was trying to tell people to calm down, she was basically trying to keep order, and then at the end she comes in and she stabs Michael in the back with a pitchfork, which, you know, cool, go Karen. That was a fun moment. Let's segue into talking about Michael and that final showdown between him and the townspeople in the street, because I have some bones to pick here. Okay. So we finally get to the end scene where Karen lures Michael out of the house. She takes his mask off. I do like that we don't see his face. I think that
can I just ask on that? Yeah, because they do repeat a beat from the last film where she tricks him, where she's like, you know, gotcha, but is it gotcha? She said something like that.
Yes, she says gotcha.
Yeah. What did you think about that? Did you think that was a bit lazy doing that again, or
no? Because I think she tricked him in a slightly different way this time. So last time she tricked him by pretending to be scared. This time she tricked him by playing on his, like, she's like, I'm a young innocent woman just like your sister, come and get me, and she held his mask out. So while I do understand that it might feel like it's a bit of a repeat, I was okay with that. What about you? Was it a little too similar?
No, I think that's fair enough.
Yeah. And then he's brought out to, like, they leave his mask in the middle of the street, and he walks out into the street, and then he looks around and everyone is surrounding him. You know, there's Tommy Doyle, everyone's there with like weapons, and I remember Stephen and I were watching it, and they have a moment where he bends down and he just grabs his mask and he puts it on, and we're all just like, oh, all these dudes are gonna die right now. Like, everyone in this scene is about to die. But then they all go after Michael and they beat him and they shoot him, and Karen curb stomps him and stabs him in the back. And after all of this, I'm pretty sure someone shoots him at point blank range. And after all of this, he still manages to get back up. And I don't mind a little bit of, like, stretching reality. Obviously, we've done this before with Michael. He survived a lot of stuff that you shouldn't survive, but we're getting to the point where he's taking on, like, Freddy Krueger levels of invincibility. And as much as I actually really loved the final scene where he got back up and kind of slaughtered everyone, because I'm always on board with a good Michael kill, and that one was really good, I was kind of at the point where I was like, okay, is he, like, actually invincible now? Because how are they going to take him down if all of this couldn't take him down? I don't know. For me, it was starting to get into the realms of disbelieving. What about you?
Bits of it I like, but no, it's again OTT. It's again, I think they box themselves into a corner because they've obviously chosen to go with this story of the mob against Michael, and obviously it's the end of the film, so they feel like they have to do one last big final battle. But again, throughout the franchise, they've sort of had this problem where it's almost like they just think, well, people will look, even though obviously this is a different timeline, but they all just think people will look back over Halloween and all the crazy shit they've done to Michael, and he just keeps returning again and again. So we've got to try and top that. And I think that's the problem. I think they feel they have to try and top that because of what's gone before. It's like we don't live in those simple times anymore where it's, you know, you could do something that isn't so over the top and it might be credible. People know there's a third film on the way from this director. Then I think they made it so Michael gets the last word on purpose, because otherwise people might just roll their eyes and like, oh, we know he's coming back anyway.
Yeah.
But I don't know what I thought about him killing off Karen. I mean, that just felt like a final kind of FU and a final sort of twist, maybe for the sake of it. Because, you know, I do like Karen, and I would like to see her stick around for the third film. So I thought that was a bit unnecessary. I thought they could have had her survive.
Definitely. I agree. That last kill was like, oh, that came out of nowhere. That being said, Hawkins was stabbed and run over by a car in the first film, and he survived. So fingers crossed that maybe Karen might survive. You never know. And given that Michael survived, God knows what in this one. They might also just be trying to get rid of Karen so that the final showdown will come down to Laurie and Michael. I feel like maybe we're going for that, but
I was going to comment on that, like thoughts for what might happen next. My prediction is then I think Laurie will die in the third film, because it's the third film anyway. And there's a line in this one about, sorry, it wasn't actually in the film. I think it might have been in the interview I read, but there's a line in the interview, I think, where she actually mentions that Laurie's the sort of character who would be happy dying as long as she knew that Michael was dead as well. It's almost like she would be happy going out heroically, sacrificing herself.
And that's what I think will happen. Is I think she'll do a kind of a taking you with me. You know, she will go out while taking Michael out with her, and they will both go out together. At least I think that's probably where we're heading for the third film.
And I think that'll leave it so that Alison's like the survivor. Yes. I think Alison, because then potentially you could do more films with her, maybe, but it might be a fit-in, you know, next generation passing the torch on to Alison. So I think that's the way they could go, and I suppose also it could motivate Alison a bit because her mother's been killed at the end of this one. The positives from the last film was those three characters, Alison, Laurie, and Karen. And I felt they were largely wasted in this. I didn't think Alison was given much to do.
And out of the film, it's like the film almost forgets about her, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait, we haven't had Alison for a while. And they just kind of pop in a random scene with her. So, yeah, I definitely get where you're coming from.
Yeah, I think out of the three, maybe Karen came out of it the best.
Yes.
I definitely think they wasted Laurie in this one. I would say they wasted Alison. So out of the three, probably Karen. Some of the stuff with like that gay couple, I sort of found it a bit bizarre. Then they would still be happily living it in the Myers family sort of house.
Yeah,
because they obviously use it to try and scare the trick-or-treaters, which, that's sort of fine, but I mean, you know whose house this is. I mean, why would you live there? Choose to live there?
No, I'm with you. And also, can we talk about their interior decorating? Because that house is hideous. Like, what is with all the green? I don't know who designed that set or what they were trying to represent, but that house was horrible. I hated that interior design. It was awful. And I wish their characters had been a little bit, I don't know, maybe better written. I wanted to like them and be empathetic with them when they died and stuff, but I don't know, I just found them annoying.
I thought a lot of the characters in this, a lot of the ones they added were badly written and probably took up too much time, because again, there's a lot of jumping about. It's one thing if they were quick kills and it's to add to the body count, but they probably spent too much time on them. And it's another thing I'll say, I would say the film was too predictable. I mean, there was a lot of telegraphing of where exactly a kill was going to come and making it obvious that this person would be killed. I guess it was just how they were going to get killed.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like, I remember when we first saw the other mental patient, my first thought was, oh God, the mob's going to go after him and accidentally kill him instead of Michael, aren't they? And like, you shouldn't be able to predict something like that early in the film. It definitely was blunter than the first film, which had surprises and you weren't quite sure what was going to happen. This one was like, I agree with you. It was predictable. And it didn't even really have much of a storyline. Like we said, it's a filler film. It's there to get the characters from film 1 to film 3, but I feel like I wish they'd given maybe a little bit more thought to film 2. It's like, just because it's a bridge film doesn't mean it can't be good.
I sort of thought was weird and I didn't like was when it's like outside the pub and they're like Tommy is first alerted to, because it's one of the nurses. She's dressed as a nurse.
Yes,
I'm assuming they were real like medical people, but
yeah,
her and her boyfriend go outside at one point, and she freaks out because she thinks Michael's in the car, and Tommy comes out and there's a bunch of them and they sort of confront him in the car, and then he starts playing with the stereo, and then you sort like he's changing the stations. It's like, Michael Myers wouldn't do this. It's
no. It was weird.
And then
and of course we find out that it isn't him. But yeah, no, it's weird because you think that it's him at first, and you're like, yeah, what's going on here? I agree. Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah.
Lots of weird stuff in the film.
Doesn't make sense anyway, because even if it was a regular person, when they see these people confronting, they would just get out the car and say,
exactly,
it's just me. But he's playing with this. But obviously it's a tease to make. But even so, you don't really believe Michael would do that anyway. So, so there's a bunch of Easter eggs. I mean, apparently someone told me to Bob Odenkirk cameo in this, and it's someone who's shown on the news at one point, and it's meant to be like a flash from the past. So I think what you get is you get like a really young Bob Odenkirk, who they use his image for that thing.
Okay.
Because when she said Bob, I thought, where the hell was he? I didn't notice Bob Odenkirk, but apparently that's what it was. She showed me a picture.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's some good stuff in this. I think there's a lot of bad stuff in this, but I do think that we might need to wait for the third movie and then see how this movie fits within the entire trilogy and if it maybe improves depending on what they decide to do in the third movie. Like, maybe when the third movie comes out, if we watch all three movies together, it might be a better experience. I say might. I'm trying to give the film the benefit of the doubt, but I mean, who knows? I didn't go into this with high expectations, so I wasn't particularly disappointed, but I do think it could definitely have been better. There's a lot of stuff that they could have done better in this film, that just a little bit more time, a little bit more care and effort put into the script and the pacing and how to get certain events to, transpire. It was a bit messy, the script.
We've arrived at ratings.
All right, I want you to go first. I want to see how low would you go.
I'm going 3 out of 10. I think it really sucked. I might consider going up to a 4 just because there's probably stuff in there like the odd scene, and I think what maybe partly saves it is you at least have some good cast members, and they're at least doing their best, not with the best like script, but I think they are obviously giving it their all. Jamie Lee Curtis, Judy Greer. I like Michael Anthony Hall. I just don't think they did a good job with the Tommy character in this. But no, I think the reason I'm going with a 3 is just because if I weigh up all the things in the movie and how much of it actually worked, I think very little worked for me. And there was a number of just really dumb scenes. And I wasn't really entertained. I mean, occasionally there might have been the odd line that made me, chuckle. I think at times there was stuff that was so silly, then I sort of laughed, but I think that's not really what they were going for. But I thought it was very boring. I would say it was way more dull than the first film he did. And it's a total mess. As I said, I don't think the political metaphor they went for with the mob stuff landed at all. I don't think that was credible. I think the best characters from the last film, I'm not including Michael because he's different in a way, but I mean Laurie, Alison, and Karen, I thought they were wasted in this movie. It was a mess. It was boring. I didn't find it scary. I thought they went too extreme for the sake of being extreme. So there was very little to recommend it. So I think it pretty much sucked. 3 out of 10. I think four's the highest I would go, but
fair enough. I'm going to go slightly higher because there were actually parts of this film that I did enjoy. So I would probably give it a 6. I seem to be more entertained than you were. I actually found it quite interesting. I thought it was messy and sloppy, but I was engaged the whole time. Again, for me, you have a good Michael, that's always going to raise the bar. So I found Michael very effective. There were a few scenes with him that I absolutely loved. Like I said, I loved the scene where he took out all the firefighters. I actually, despite the incredibility of him being able to get back up, I did love the final scene where he rose up and took out the neighborhood. I loved the scene where he was stalking Marion and the little girl, all grown up now, in the park. I thought Karen's character was really good in this. I thought she got to grow quite a bit and become kind of like a bit more like her mum, kind of become a bit more of a badass. I agree that Alison was wasted. Laurie, I wouldn't say she was wasted because I don't think there was anything else they could really do with her character within the realms of realism. But I do agree that if they were going to sideline her, then she should have just sat the movie out, because it does feel like, why would you have a character like Laurie Strode in the movie and then not have her do anything? And I really liked the flashbacks. I thought the flashbacks were so well done. As I've said, I liked Loomis turning up. I thought that was a great little Easter egg. So I would go at 6, and I'm also rating it slightly higher because I am trying to keep in mind that it is the second part in a trilogy, and that might go down once we see the final part and it might not work out. But for me, I think it wasn't so terrible that I wouldn't watch it again. I definitely, after I finished watching it, wanted to watch 2018 as kind of like a palate cleanser and kind of remember that I did originally love this reboot. But I would go with a 6 because there were parts of it that did work for me. Michael's scary, and I liked the flashback. I thought technically the flashbacks were great, and that gets a lot of points. So I'm going with a 6 because there were parts of it that were enjoyable for me, even though a lot of it was very messy. So that's my overall score there.
I can accept the point about it being a trilogy. I'm not so convinced, even if we get a good final film, it'll really lift this. It depends if there's stuff in that's paid off that they've set up in this. I think that's what may save it a little bit. See, it's going to be frustrating because if I end up liking the third film, and, just as a Halloween fan, I might feel, well, I've got to have these 3 films on DVD. So I might be in this annoying position of having to watch this middle film again just because it's part of the trilogy and it does continue. It's obviously, as you said, the first film you can sort of watch as a standalone, and not so much with this one. And I think I'm left with a bit of a choice, really, whether I see the next one at the cinema, because I'm not sure if I want to, put myself out there again after this one. I think if there's an option for me to find it online, I think I might just stream the next one.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think
I will see the next one in the cinema, but only because I kind of missed seeing this one in the cinema. So I will go and see the next one in the cinema just for the sake of it, because hopefully we will not still be in lockdown next year. So fingers crossed. Well, it is actually going to be out here soon, but not for another 2 weeks, because lockdown is finally easing. But yeah, I had to see it obviously as soon as possible, and I didn't want you to have to sit on your review for 2 weeks. So the next one I will see in the cinema, but mostly just because I missed this one in the cinema. So to kind of make up for that.
Yeah, well, true. I might still go. Luckily, the cinema up the road to me is like really cheap, so nice. I won't be paying much to see it. But I can imagine people, if you live in a city where the cinema's quite pricey.
Yeah.
And you come away watching this, you might feel a bit shortchanged. So, okay, so that's our thoughts on Halloween Kills.
And that's the Halloween franchise.
Certainly, and we're up to date now. There's obviously one more to come next year, and then we'll see after that. But obviously, some of you would already have seen the film since it came out on Friday. So let us know, did you like it? How do you think it compared to the last film? Do you agree with some of our points? Do you agree with Rachel on the flashback scenes? How did they work for you? What did you think of Tommy in the film? What did you think overall of the mob plot and stuff like that? Let us know. We'll be curious to know what you think of this movie, and what do you think could happen in the third movie of David Gordon Green and the Halloween franchise. So we've got that to look forward to. So this is a good point to just promote. Then we will be doing a ranking video now that we're up to date. We will be ranking in order where we would put each Halloween franchise movie, and we'll be just summing up our thoughts on each one. And that video will be over on Rachel's channel. So if you keep looking out for that, Rachel McDonald on YouTube, I'll put the link in the description. But if you look out for that, that should be in the coming week. And that's something we're going to do with most of the big franchises, where there's a number of entries and it's obviously a sort of a big iconic franchise. I think we will do that for all those, where we will, once we're up to date, we will rank them. So we're going to be doing that, and look out for that on Rachel's channel. And I mentioned this on another video, but our next big franchise is going to be the Scream franchise. And that is because we've got Scream 5 coming next year, early next year. So in the coming weeks, in fact, next week, we're going to record the first review of the original Scream. So that's going to be on our next big franchise. So thanks for listening. Look out for more. Like and subscribe. Share us out on social media. And I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.
Bye.